Hello there and welcome back to another video. So this video is going to be a bit different. It's going to be some sort of tutorial and you're going to guess by the title, but I'm going to talk about how I scan and edit my work to make it look more like the original drawing. Of course you can later edit it to however extent you want, but I'm going to talk about how to make it the most like your actual drawing. The first thing you need to do is put your work on your scanner. So I'm not gonna record that part. I have an old printer as a scanner. The printer doesn't work and the scanner still works quite well, so I'm using it as a scanner right now. And what I usually do is I put the work and I put some weight on top of it. I search for the heaviest book I can find. Right now is Harry Potter, The Order of the Phoenix, and I put it on top to make sure the drawing stands flat. Mainly because if it's a watercolor paper or something like that, it usually comes. So that's the first step. Then the other one, well, you connect the printer, of course, to your computer in however way you can, and you open in your computer, usually on the settings on devices, you usually find your printer or your scanner and you can click on it and open it, or sometimes it has a proper software that works with it. For me is to right click on it and click on start digitalizing. So this window will open and in here we have some settings that you can see. What I do first, keeping everything like it is click on preview. This will give me a quick preview of how it looks, my piece, with any edits or with anything. I don't click on anything here because if I pull up the resolution or anything, sometimes it takes much longer to load a preview, and what I want is really just that, a preview, so I can make some switches, some changes and adjust it if I want to. So for example here, as this piece, it's big but it has a big white border, I usually adjust it a tiny bit to make it look more proportioned. Of course you can change this later too. I usually also, at least in my printer, I avoid the borders, like the exact border. There's like a couple of pixels that sometimes look weird because the paper is not completely there, so I try to avoid it always, and I cut it here so just to save some of that work that will be editing it later on Photoshop. So here I don't touch on anything, I leave it, the profile I leave it on photo, and you have like documents. If you want to scan something, documents will be on black and white, so that's why I keep it on photo. And then the color, black and white, whatever you want. Color, of course, if you have a work on color. If you scan something on black and white and on color, you can get some blues, yellows, tones, and you will have to take them off later as you edit them, so I will recommend you to put it in black and white or grayscale if you want to scan a black and white piece, but for now we'll keep it on color. Then a big part of this is going to be the file. Well, you can have a BMP, which honestly I don't know what it is, but these three are commonly known: the JPG, PNG and TIF. These three archives are pretty different. For example, a JPG, which is commonly used, is an archive that will compress. So every time you open it, it will decompress, and every time you close it, it will compress again. This means that you will lose information. So I won't recommend this unless you want to give it a common use. But a PNG is a non-compressed file, so this usually keeps the quality high. And a TIF is the best you can have if you're scanning documents. I will always recommend you to scan on TIF and keep the original file, and then from that one make any copies you want, and they could be on JPG, on PNG or on whatever you want. Most places don't accept TIF files, so I will highly recommend you to keep that as an origin file that you won't edit that much. You will edit it just to the point where you want it and then make copies of it, so you won't lose any information every time you open it and close it and edit it, which is honestly when the files start getting corrupted and get severe losses of quality. And then another big part is the resolution. The usual resolution for printing is 300 dpi, which honestly is a good resolution, but of course this will actually affect the size of your drawing. So what I do usually is I pump it up. This one goes up to 1200 dpi, but I don't usually use it that big unless I want a really big file, and that's a huge file, and sometimes you don't need it, but if you do, then go ahead and print it out in the highest resolution you can. What I do is I pump it into 600, which for me it usually works fine, and the size works fine, so that's great. And then what I do, because I know printers, at least mine, tend to go a bit on the shiny part, so I take off a tiny bit of shine, just a tiny bit. Usually I don't work with this too much because I will rather play with them later on Photoshop, but lately I've been doing this because I come up with really shiny images and sometimes I lose information when I scan them, so we'll go a bit with a bit less of shine. I don't touch the contrast because I feel like contrast sometimes can make your images look worse. And then once you have this, you click on digitalize or scan or whatever. I won't click on preview again because it will get the same preview basically. It's so tiny you can't really appreciate anything else. This is gonna take a while, usually. Alright, here's our file, where you can change its name and proceed to edit it. So this is the file now. It looks great, it has good quality, you can come quite close and you can appreciate little details. Here it becomes a bit pixelated, so that means we're going over the actual resolution. So here's the actual size, where it's supposed to be perfectly fine. So this file is actually quite alright, but sometimes you will get things like this bit, like some dust that can go in your scanner. I will highly recommend you to pass a clean cloth over the screen before scanning it, because it will get rid of some of the dust. But sometimes, in my case for example, I think it's inside because I've tried cleaning it and some of them don't go away. So you can erase this on Photoshop later too, and that's fine. So let's open it on Photoshop and see how we can change it. I'm gonna do a copy of it so we can compare. There we go. Let's open it with Photoshop now. So before this, some years ago, I usually complicated myself a lot when it came to edit it, and most of the times it will turn out quite bad. So now I have some sort of technique that is kind of easier, and I find it very much more effective than what I used to have. So here's our file. When I took off some of the shine, what I did is that some of this white is not as white as sometimes. Sometimes this white, for example, it will have come like kind of mix it with this outside. The first thing I do, I usually go to image and levels, which is also Ctrl L from levels. And here what I do, you can adjust the whites and the darks. So for example, in my usual image, if I don't adjust the shine, it will be something like this. So I'm losing information here. What I usually do is I pull off the values a tiny, sometimes from here, but this usually damages the image a bit more, or from here a tiny bit. And usually I move this just a tiny bit here till I make it more the actual colors that the photo has. This usually is almost the only step I need sometimes, because the image turns out just as it is on real life. Just by adjusting the levels, sometimes you don't need much more. But one extra step I do usually, this will also help you make the whites more white if you need that at some point. If it turned out a bit grey, you can also make the whites more white, doing the opposite that I did. I actually darkened the values. You can actually light them if you need to. What I do next is open saturation and tone, which is Ctrl U. It's the same as an image, adjustments and saturation. And here I go color for color. I don't adjust them all of the time at a time because it usually turns out bad. I'll go tone for tone, and what I do is I saturate them at the most to know where that tone is. You can see it appearing and disappearing, and so I know which color I'm playing with. So for example, this is the orange, and it turned out okay. So here is where I recommend you to have the original drawing at hand. So when you have the original drawing at hand, you can compare them and actually get a better color. So for example, in mine, this is not as reddish, it's more orangey. So I'm gonna move this to make it a bit more orange. This side is for pinkish and this one is more orange. So I'm gonna feel free. I don't usually trust myself with the mouse here. I usually, when I find something almost right, I change the numbers. This looks similar, and sometimes I'm gonna pull up a bit of the saturation because it's actually quite a saturated tone. Maybe not that much. Let's try 8. Yeah, and you can turn also, make it lighter or make it a bit darker. So yeah, we'll go tone for tone. So for example, there's some yellows here that are not really there. It's some sort of effect from the light or something. And well, as I actually have light on here on the crown, light yellow on the crown, I will not touch it much, but sometimes what I will do, if it's not in any part of the drawing, I will just turn it off completely or almost. So I will get rid of those tones that are not really there. In here, as it is the crown, I think I'm gonna turn it a bit down, but not that much. And this is almost good. Turn it to less 5. Alright, keep moving. So I repeat this process with everything, just to make the colors more accurate. So for example, this green is here and there. It's actually on points that is not that green, so I'm gonna turn it down a bit. Maybe make it a tiny bit darker, just a tiny bit. And the tone is actually pretty right. I'm gonna turn it a bit less because it's kind of bluish, and in reality it's not that bluish. So for example, you can see that sometimes in my drawing this is actually quite green, and here it's considered a blue. Now that I'll touch cyan and blue, you will see that these tones will appear. So make sure that, well, take into account that sometimes your greens in reality are not going to be the greens in reality on the scan. So here are my cyans, which you can see are part of the greens. So what I will do in my case, I will turn them, I'm not going to touch the saturation, I believe. I'm going to turn it a bit greenish. Maybe not that much. On 3. And I'm gonna make it grayish because it's definitely grayish. Something like this in reality. Something there. And I think I'm gonna leave it, make it a bit darker maybe. Not that much. There. And now with the blues, there shouldn't be any blues. Well, there's not, just in the eyes. And the eyes are actually kind of bluish, but not that much. I'm gonna turn it a bit greener if I can see them. You can zoom this at any time if you need to do all more details. Like me, for example, I'm editing the eye, so I could just close this with saving everything I did until now and just zoom it in if you need to see it. And then magenta. There is actually some sort of magenta there, but it's not that much pinkish. So I'm gonna turn down the saturation and move it up here because I believe it's kind of a purplish tone more than magenta. So here's a purplish tone, kind of, and there we go. So here's the comparison. You can click on here to see this is the history kind of, it records every step you take, and you see only in 2 steps I have the actual drawing that looks really similar to the real one, and see the comparison here, before and after. It always is much more pale though when you edit it. And well, the one last step I will take is I will zoom up all that I need. I will take a painting brush, make it a bit bigger, and click on white. And sometimes it's better instead of white to take this tone, because it can be a white that's not exactly that white. In this case it is. And I'll just go over the little dots I told you before, or sometimes things like this that are kind of marks that are in the paper, or some sketch marks that you did before, and take good care of not touching anything that you don't want to do. But Ctrl-Z is your friend, remember. You just have to go over your drawing. You could do this with your graphic tablet. I'm doing it with my mouse right now. You probably can hear the click, but that's because I don't have it connected. But it's usually easier if you just connect your tablet and do it there. But yeah, it's actually quite a quick process. Some people take the time to clean all the borders, and usually you don't need it. I mean, if it is just for making prints of it, usually if you clean it, it will be enough. If you do want to make stickers or something, you could probably clean it up, but if you want me to do a tutorial of how I will clean that up, which honestly I have a pretty easy technique. Usually it is enough for making stickers, because stickers can have a smaller resolution, so you can dissimulate anything that might have gone wrong. Well, that's it, that's cleaned up. So one last thing I want to quickly say is that you can click on image size, and here you can see the resolution we choose, which was 600. Usually goes to this number, which is almost 600, and here's the actual size on pixels. So if you do need, one trick our photography teacher told us is that usually if you turn down the resolution a bit, so for example, if I want to make this a tiny bit bigger, which you usually shouldn't do, but if you do want to make it a bit bigger, not like extremely bigger, but a bit, you can turn down the resolution, and usually the image will go down in size, because losing resolution means losing pixels. But you can make it, if you remember the number from before, it's around 6,000, 4,000. If you turn it down, you can turn it up a bit, like for example that, and the quality wouldn't change that much. See, for example, I only needed to put a zoom a bit off, and the quality is almost the same. So I don't recommend you using this all the time, but for example, in my scanner, what I will do is just scan it in a higher resolution, and I will get a higher size. But if you do have a scanner that only goes here, for example, and you need a bigger file, you can do that, because usually with 3000 it's plenty to use any image. So with 3000, if you want to make it bigger, you won't lose, you can make it even bigger, you won't lose that much information. See, there's still quite a good quality. It's not the best, but it's not that bad. I'm gonna cancel it because the size is good for me, but there we go. Just a quick thing that I learned. So it's not the ideal thing, but I just wanted to tell you, just in case you need it. Sometimes it's a good method in case you're in a hurry or something, and you can save it. And of course you can save this as any file you want. Just take into account that if you save your TIFF like this, like you have here, you can use it anytime you want. You can open it almost every time and keep it forever. So I will highly recommend you to have an original TIFF copy for the original. Now let's quickly compare these two, but it will be something like the same. Here you go. Now it looks much more like the real one, and that's exactly what we wanted, and just with 3 easy steps. Well, 2 if you don't count taking off dust marks. So that's it for today. I hope you liked this little video. I just wanted to let you know that it's easier than what you can think of to edit and scan your files, because at the beginning it was like this big nightmare, and honestly I couldn't find anyone that's made it simple for me, so I kind of had to go through photography classes that teaches us some of the things about files and things, and I learned how to do it better and easier for myself. So I hope this helped you. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions and you have any doubts left, tell me in the comments and I will be glad to answer them. And like this video if it helped you, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you, bye!